Good morning. How's it going? Well, it could be afternoon or evening when you're listening to this, but I'm still going to say good morning because the episodes come out at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Welcome to Project Freelance. My name is Kay Anagonio, and I am your host here on this podcast, all about freelancing and creating content. So, this week on the podcast, I am talking with Charlie Thompson, a musician and music producer based out in Nashville. We're going to be talking music production. We're going to be talking music playing, live shows. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. But before we get into the episode, there's a few housekeeping things I need to let you know about. First of all, if you like this episode at any point in time, please leave a rating and feedback. It helps the podcast grow. All you got to do is go to Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and feedback, take a screenshot, send it to me at Project Freelance on Instagram, and I will send you a signed photo print. Yes, I am a photographer and videographer, so if you want a signed photo print, all you have to do is leave a rating and feedback. It helps the podcast a lot, so I appreciate you doing that. This podcast continues to grow because of people like you, because of listeners like you, so thank you for doing that. It goes a long way, trust me. The second thing I need to say is that I have a book out called No Tracers, an Urban Explorer's Diary. If you guys are into abandoned places, I have an entire book full of photographs and stories from my urban explorations. So if you want to check that out, or if you want to check out my blog, you can go to notracers.com. And lastly, I need to thank our partner, Liquid Death Water. If you've never heard of Liquid Death Water, well, don't you worry. I've got an ad coming for you in 3, 2, 1. From the streams of the Austrian Alps comes a new kind of water. A water that is sure to raise you from your grave. If you're tired of buying cases of plastic water bottles that contain carcinogens and God knows what else, or if you're trying to lower your waste footprint, Liquid Death comes in beautifully rugged aluminum cans. Murder your thirst with a can of Liquid Death. Check the link in the description and use code JustTheLetterK at checkout for 10% off your order. Liquid Death. Murder your thirst. So yeah, use code JustTheLetterK for 10% off your order at liquiddeath.com, and you can also just click on the link in the description and it will take you straight there and it will implement that coupon code for you. Thank you guys for listening. All right, let's get into this episode. Charlie, please introduce yourself and what it is you do to the Project Freelance audience.
Cool. I'm Charlie Thompson. I play in a band called Our Last Trial, and I'm a lead guitarist, and I also mix and produce a lot of music.
Amazing. So tell me how you got into music in the first place. What made you catch the bug for like audio and music?
Well, when I was 5 years old, I kind of went into a guitar shop, and I was like, man, I kind of want to learn guitar, because my dad, he plays guitar, but he didn't kind of stay around to teach me. So I kind of went into a guitar shop and I basically picked up one and was like, oh, I'm going to learn this. And I wind up going through hours of pain and suffering playing on a guitar with very high action and teaching myself, oh, this is not how a guitar should be. So getting through all that kind of made me strive to, play it more, because I was like, well, this hurts. So now I got to just keep going. So that taken forward to now, I've been playing guitar for 18 years almost. So since I was 5, and I'm 24 and I'll be 25 in February. So the producing side of it came, I'd say, after high school. I was very into writing music. Used to use an iPad. That was a very interesting experience, writing music on an iPad. But then getting out of that, it just kind of went from there. I got like my first computer. I started recording rough mixes that sounded like crap on GarageBand, and then like it took off from there, and I went to like Logic, and I started moving on from there to all the production stuff now.
So as far as guitar playing goes, can you tell me about the first time you ever played a live show?
Oh yeah, my I like full live show, or like high school?
Not high
show?
School, after high school. Fuck high school shows.
Oh yeah, that was a very interesting experience. My first show was actually with an old band called A Mile In, but then we later changed their name to Before We Collapsed. We played in Nashville at Rocket Town, and I remember being nervous as hell because we were just playing our songs that we wrote, And we didn't really have songs recorded, so it was kind of like no backtracks, no nothing like that, and we just kind of played it. Things went pretty okay. I still was nervous as heck, and I was like, man, I've always been like one of those things for tone. So my tone back then wasn't as good as it is like now because of like how I've been building my repertoire of gear. But it's very funny to go back and like there's a video of it still, and it was like my first show. I was like, my gosh, my hair was wild, everything like that. Yeah, you just like weird geared and all that kind of thing. But it was fun. I very much enjoyed it. We had a couple things break though. I'm not gonna lie. I broke my wireless on stage the first time I started playing. I jumped and the guitar the wireless is like went right off and snapped. And I was like, oh well, there's that. So yeah, that was my first show experience at Rocket Town in Nashville.
That's amazing. I love hearing about everybody's first show. You know, there's always something that goes haywire, and for you, your freaking wireless pack just breaks. Oh my God. So when you started doing production stuff, what was the first thing you produced? I assume it was something for yourself.
The first thing I produced, it was actually an orchestrated piece.
Oh, wow.
I went from GarageBand on my iPad and I wrote an orchestra piece that I sent over to my computer when I got the Logic software, opened it up and started producing that. Little secret, I really like video game music and movie music and things like that. So like that kind of production work is something I've always wanted to get into in general. So yeah, that was the first thing I produced, was like a orchestrated piece. And then like the first thing I released, I was like, oh yeah, I mixed, I mastered, and I did all this stuff. I actually released a cover of Carol of the Bells. It's on YouTube and things like that. But I wrote that and I was really proud of it, and I released it, and I did Jingle Bells, and I was like, wow, these actually turned out really well. So those were things I was like, oh, this is something I'm ready for. And there we go. And I produced it and got it out there. So those were my two first ones.
So what was the feedback like for those first two releases? Like, how did people respond to them? And being your first like releases, your first things you produced, I know that a lot of times we look back on those things and we like kind of like cringe. So looking back on them, how do you feel about them now?
I still feel pretty good about them, just because like I released it like about a year ago now. I think, yeah, it's about to hit December, so a year ago,
Oh,
which
okay.
I'm trying to put out like a whole Christmas album in general. They sounded pretty good in my opinion, but like I'm definitely going to reopen up the files and like kind of mix them a little bit more better, especially with the new softwares I got and all kinds of things like that. So I get the feedback was really good actually. A lot of my friends were like, "What? I didn't know you could produce like that." They just thought I did like demos and things like that. They didn't know I could actually like produce, which was pretty funny. So the feedback was pretty sweet, especially for the orchestra element.
I love that. You know, like I love surprising friends with things like that. You know, it's always fun to kind of surprise people with your talents and stuff. So, do you have any formal education or training when it comes to mixing, mastering, producing, or are you completely self-taught?
I'm completely self-taught. I literally all I have done is sat at a computer for hours and just learned production from start to finish. And then I paid for like Nail the Mix with like Nolly and a couple of the other people on there, which was really helpful, and I got to learn a lot and see what people do for production. But most of the time it's just me in there, and then my band we released like an album. And the way that we release our album is I actually go to a studio with my producer Trevor, and he shows me how he produces our music, and I just go in there and I help him, because I usually do for our last trial. I record and produce like the beginning of the whole album process basically, and then we send it over to get mixed and mastered. Everything else is me, including like synth and all that kind of stuff right now. So that's a new thing, is adding all the sound design to everything. But yeah, so that's how I kind of pushed into that world of production even more, just with the training that I had from my producer, and then just nail the mix. That's it. Self-taught.
No, I love it. And I feel like very similarly, like I'm not good at music production because I'm just a vocalist, but everything I've learned has been from watching producers produce my stuff, like watching them do the instrumentals and then do sound design and do the synths and do all that stuff. And I mean, I use Reaper because when I first started working with a producer, he was in Reaper, so like by nature I just naturally kind of went into the Reaper DAW, and I've used it ever since. I've loved it, and I can't see myself switching over to like something else just because like I love using that software so much. And so can you talk a little bit more about why you use Logic, the things you get out of using that program?
Yeah, for sure. So I used to use GarageBand, so everything kind of integrated really well going to Logic. It was like, oh, I'm going to go from here to here. Basically, oh, pull this plugin, pull this all basically everything just integrated really well. And I kind of opened up Logic and I was like, wow, this is a lot easier than like I used to use Pro Tools for a little bit, and I kind of was like, I'll use Pro Tools when I'm recording like multi-track drums, but that's about it. Everything else is going to be on Logic, just because of the mixing and mastering software on it. It's a lot easier just to find all the fast keys and just all the I guess it is just more integrated, an easier way to basically open up a project. Like templates are easy. So if I get like this is my production for like guitar work and things like that, this is how it works. I can just open up the template and all my plugins are already there and loaded in, and I just kind of go from there. With Pro Tools, it was just a lot of buttons and a lot of things that you just unnecessary, I guess, like I don't know exactly how to say it, but it's like very unnecessary like steps to have to producing a song when Logic is just super simple. You open it up and it's done. Especially if you write it on GarageBand, you just pull it over and open up new software, and then you can add all kinds of other things. And especially the instruments that come stock on Logic are really good. Like GarageBands are cool, but then like you get stock plugins on like Logic, and I'm like, wow, a lot of the stuff actually sounds pretty good. So I've been impressed by Logic ever since like I think 2014. That's when I first bought it.
And where do you get like your stock plugins from, and where do you get other like effects and things like that? Like what are some of your favorite like effects? I know there's like Joey Sturgis has a bunch of stuff. There's like tons of different people out there that have plugins. So whose plugins do you like to use, and like where are you sourcing your stuff from?
Okay, well, this list is a little bit longer now, just because of I just researched a lot and got a lot more into the plugin world. But for Logic, I don't use any of the stock ones anymore. I used to, but they just come kind of like you download them; they're already inside the file of Logic. But the ones I've been using right now, I use a lot of UAD software, which is Universal Audio Devices. I use a lot of their software now. And then for like guitar, I use Neural DSP and the Kemper, which is like my digital amp rack. And then I'd say for all the other production stuff I do is like Slate Digital. I use them a lot. And then what's the other one? Waves. I use Waves as well. So all those softwares is like basically what I go into. But the ones I use the most are UAD, because I use the Apollo Twin as a interface, and all their plugins just come from the interface itself. And I'm like, wow, everything is just more direct and it's cleaner when you're recording. So I'm like, this sounds great, and that's good with me. So UAD and Neural DSP and the Slate Digital world, which is amazing. By the way, Slate Digital, if you're a producer, you can pay like $10 a month. They have like a really cool like bundle where you get a lot of plugins and software and like mixing classes for only $10 a month. So if you're a producer, you should definitely do that. It's like super cheap, and you get a lot of plugins that you can download.
And I'll put a link in the description to the Slate Digital as well, so people can directly go there from this episode and check out more of their stuff. So as far as like listening to other people's mixes and production work, is that something that you actively are doing? Like, do you listen to other producers' work in order to kind of take inspiration or kind of, I don't really know how to ask it, like build off of what they're doing and kind of go in a similar direction for your own productions?
Oh yeah, like all the time. Like I've been listening to like Currents and like All Shall Perish and all these other bands that I've been listening to kind of. So I basically started like learning guitar tone from like, I guess, Nolly from Periphery. I'm really into Periphery and like, because first of all, Nolly is a genius when it comes to producing any of the music, and so is Misha. And just to see them in a room together and working on a song is pretty crazy. But I would say like, yeah, I'll always listen to mixes, like including my band's mix. Like when my producer sends us over a new mix, I'm listening to it. I'm like, oh, that's what he did there, and that's what this sounds like. And listening to the Current's new album, which is amazing, and how Nolly produced it and made it sound pretty insane for guitar and drums, and how everything just hits at a different level. Yeah, I'm always listening to new music from producers, my friends that are producers as well, just kind of understanding what they do and like being able to implement it into my own production stuff.
Love it. Yeah, I think it's important that we do that. I do the same thing with other like visual creators because I mean, as a videographer, I do take a lot of inspiration from like Peter Lindgren and Peter McKinnon and like all these other creators online because like they make these amazing like tutorials even on like how to shoot product shots or like how to shoot better B-roll shots. And so I love taking inspiration from other creators, and I think it's important that we do that because it allows us to have like a new perspective on our own work,
Yeah, that's exactly why we do music, I guess you could say, is to show a different perspective, what we learn, so we can go from there.
Exactly. And then tell me about some of the challenges you've faced when it comes to producing and how you overcame them.
Well, the biggest one is cleaning up the mix. A lot of times when I was younger, I used to just kind of produce and like be, oh yeah, this is production basically, and push everything and push all the loudness, and everything just didn't sound right, and I was having clipping problems. And that was one of my biggest problems, was kind of getting levels down. I have always had like an ear for like, oh yeah, this is what the guitar should sound like, the bass and all these other production like styles. But it was just the levels. Getting your levels correct is like the most important thing, because if it's not leveled right and certain things don't hit at the same time, or different times, or where you want a place to hit and something else not to hit, it just sounds weird and sounds off, and it just creates clipping. So that was one of the struggles I had to get over. And the way I kind of did it was I just sent a bunch of mixes like that I've done, and I sent them over to my producer, Trevor, and he was just like, hey, this sounds a little weird here, so just check your levels on this, and back and forth. We just used to shoot messages back and forth, because he's been a real helpful person in my life, because he's like, oh yeah, Charlie probably wants to take over on the Our Last Trial production stuff at some point, so this is what we got right here. There's two producers in my band. There's me and my drummer, so me and him kind of mixes back and forth and all that kind of stuff too. So it kind of like goes together, and we have like a really good like hey, this is what it should sound like, or hey, this sounds a little weird, so we can fix this. But yeah, that's how I basically got over it, is sending mixes to people, getting some feedback, and then learning from it, and then just kind of understanding the levels and having good monitors. Like that's the number one, is having good monitors to listen to your mixes.
So what monitors, what other gear are you using as far as like monitors go, as far as your computer goes, as far as like if you have any like preamps or anything like that, like what are you using as far as gear goes?
Oh yeah, I use so for gear, I used the Apollo Twin. That's what I used for my interface. And then I used Atom Audio TV7s, and then I have the subs with it as well from Atom Audios, which are really great. I use a MacBook Pro 2018 with the touch bar, 16 gig of RAM. I can't stress this enough. If you're a producer, get like a lot of RAM, because your RAM will be taken up when you use plugins. I can guarantee you that. Which I'm about to get a different one because of all the plugins I'm using now. So 16 gig of RAM, it has 512 solid state drive on it. And then I use the Kemper. A Kemper is like one of my favorite amps that I've ever used. That's all my guitar processing software right now, especially for when I'm doing like an analog kind of run. I will use the Kemper just to model whatever amp I want, and then put it through the software, and just it'll re-record itself, and then there's my guitar tone. And then for preamps, I'm using the UAD what was that again? Whoops. UA. It's just a UA 610B. That's what it is. Whoops. I use all those preamps from UAD though. They're pretty solid, and when you get a UAD software, you can get like a pretty good discount on some plugins. So whenever you buy one. Just save up a little bit more money so you can get the other plugins with it. They're pretty good.
Yeah, I think people are often too quick to like purchase their plugin without realizing that if you just wait a little bit longer and save a little bit more, then you can get all this other stuff with it.
Yep, bundle deals are the best way to go. Like I bought my Apollo, and then I was like, oh wow, they have a deal for like getting all these softwares for like $400, and you're like, wow, that's a lot of software, and you're like, whoa. So if you just budget a little bit more, you can get some amazing software on top of a pretty great interface. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And then what are some other projects or other people that you've been producing while you were, learning and growing as a producer?
Well, so I used to work on my, I had a rock project I used to do for a little bit. I'm still doing it. I'm just kind of setting it on the side right now because I'm doing so much more with my band, and then I have my solo stuff coming out, and then I do guitar demos for a company called Drop D Guitars, and I produce and write all those songs on guitars for them. I work with various artists, like basically anybody is like, hey, you want to do something with me? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Just trying to create that content for being a guitarist and all that kind of thing as well. But then again, I'm not just that. I can play multiple instruments, and that's why the production world really works. When you can play multiple instruments, you can just kind of go to the studio and work on new songs. But most of the time, I'm working on my own stuff, or I'm working with my friend Zoe. She's a great person. She's a classically trained vocalist, and she is an amazing person. You guys can check her out too. Her name is Zoe. Oh, what is it? That I can't remember. Oh, Zoe Alexandria. That's her name on YouTube. She's pretty great. I produced her cover of "Color of the Wind" by Parkway Drive on YouTube. It's pretty good, and I liked how the mix turned out. So, kind of working with other different genres as well is really helpful. The only genre I haven't done yet, and I don't think I'll ever do, is country. I just can't do it. I live in Nashville. I'm done with country.
I love country. Like it's kind of like a guilty pleasure, but I get it. You're surrounded by it, so you're like, nah.
Oh yeah, like especially when you have to when you go out to a show and they're like, oh yeah, do you know how to play this song? And you're like, this is the most generic country song in the world. No, like I like folk music because it's got really cool guitar parts, but like country, I'm like, man, I just can't get it. I can't get used to the new stuff anymore.
I get it. It's more like I feel like country is trying to go into the hip hop world.
Oh
more.
Yeah, for sure. 100, especially when you put a rapper on it. That's where it is right there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I'm all down for collaborating and doing and crossing genres. Like I have post-hardcore and metalcore music, and I have rappers in my music, but I feel like it fits more than it does with country music. That's just my opinion on it.
Oh no, I agree with it. Like pretty 100%. I really like the new metal world that we're going into, like Alpha Wolf, and then we have Dropout Kings. I like the little bit of rap with metal vibes into it. I really enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a good crossover when it comes to like metal and hip hop, and I think that the aggression comes out better than like it would say in like a country song, just because like country is more like sad music. I guess, like not all country is sad, but I feel like the best country songs are sad.
Oh no, yeah, they are. Yeah, it's like I was talking to my friend about it. Yeah, he doesn't like country but likes it at the same time. He's like you gotta have your beer, you gotta have your women, you gotta have God, and you have to have depression. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, that's pretty much a country song.
Yep. So, absolutely.
Yeah, that's like Nashville's all about that, which is funny because now Nashville's actually starting to get like more of a metal scene. And before COVID, we were having like a lot of metal shows here, which is pretty crazy. So seeing just a country world of Nashville, kind of like, hey, we can do like some metal. Like I'm doing like a cover show in a bar in Nashville for emo night. And that's going to be starting like a weekly thing soon. So I'm like, okay, so this is a little different. Nashville's never done this before. It's usually like, hey, you want to play like Keith Urban or Brad Paisley? And I'm like, okay. But basically, yeah, playing like emo songs and playing some metal. Like that's what's crazy about it right now is that Nashville's starting to open up their world of genres.
That's rad. That makes me want to move to Nashville even more, damn it.
You should. It's a great place, and I'm here.
Yeah, true. You're there. Renee Phoenix from Fit for Rivals is there, and her guitarist Shay Padilla is there as well. So like, I've got friends out there. Maddie Mullins from Memphis Mayfire is out there. Like, damn, like so many of my friends are out there, and I almost had an opportunity to move there to work for a drum company, and unfortunately they had to like push off the hiring process because of whatever. But I was close. I was close to coming out to Nashville, man, and maybe one day I'll get out there.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, was it Minel?
No, it wasn't. It was Pearl.
Oh yeah. I forgot we have a Pearl building here. We
Yeah,
have so
they were looking for a content creator, and I was like, hey, I'd do that.
Oh yeah, well, you create some pretty great content. Like, I was thinking it's pretty awesome to be hitting you up and be like, hey, yeah, let's play a heavy song, and then you like sent me Slaughter Prevail, and I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be fucking great. Yep, this is it. This is
You
I'm
said
ready.
heavy. I was like, well, I'll give you heavy if you want heavy.
Yep, it was very very heavy, and I was like, yep, this is what I'm down for. My bandmates, it was super funny actually. It was filming it that where we shot that at is actually at our vocal booth.
Oh yeah.
We have a really massive vocal booth at our house, and it's pretty crazy. But it's funny because when I was over there, like, oh my gosh, like here's a mask, here's all this kind of stuff. Like, let's like you're gonna really do it up. And then I was like, I'm sweating in here. This is really hot because I was like moving around, but I was like the door was shut, there was no ventilation, and the air was off, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. And
Ugh,
basically, yep, just died from playing guitar in there.
love it. But it turned out so well, and like people have loved it. And like, if you guys listening are unaware, we did a cover of Demolisher by Slaughter to Prevail, and it was so much fun. First of all, getting the drums produced, like obviously they're all digital drums. Ryan Cunningham did the drums and the bass on the song, and he was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to figure out these drum parts. And then right when we were trying to figure it out, they released a drum playthrough. So he had a drum playthrough to literally see exactly what he needed to program. So thank you to Slaughter to Prevail for doing playthrough videos. Like that was hugely helpful and instrumental to building this song.
Yeah, like I I've had to produce some covers where I've had to like produce the drums, and not having like a backing ground to go to it sucks, because then you're like, oh, you got to think from like a drummer's perspective, and you have to you have to think from your producer's perspective. So Ryan really freaking killed it on the drums and the bass as well.
Yeah, and Roger also played guitar on it, and it was so cool to connect with him. And I recently did a podcast episode with Roger as well. So if you guys want to listen to that, you can go back and check that episode out. He also produces music, and he's in a band called Fate Destroyed with my drummer from my band Matriarchs, Ben, who Ben is also on the podcast. So I just have all these people that I'm networked with on the podcast, which is really cool. And I love having people on to talk music and talk production. And this season, I really wanted to make an effort to have more music producers on here, because as a musician myself, I do want to learn more and learn these tips and tricks and things. So do you have like a couple tips for up and coming producers as far as like things you've learned? Because my last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started? But if you've got a few things, I would love to hear them.
Always invest in your gear. That's like a big one. If you don't invest in your gear, you're gonna have lesser quality of audio. Even just starting out, like I believe in this kind of thing. So I think about like producing as like I think about like buying a guitar basically. I started out with a pretty like it was a cheap guitar. It was my grandfather's guitar, and I played it for a while. But then I was like, I gotta move on from this. This is hurting my hands, and it didn't want make me. It basically was like, oh yeah, I don't really want to play now because I just don't have the guitar for it right now. So then after that, I wind up saving up money. I had some family give it to me, and then I wind up buying like a pretty sick, nice guitar. And I was like, okay. So then it made me play more, and it made me get better. Same thing with production. You probably don't want to really work on music if you have like not the best of the computer, or your interface is not working out well, or your monitors don't sound good, or something just doesn't sound good, because you're not going to want to produce music because it's going to sound bad in your opinion. So definitely budget and get the stuff that you need but also want for sound quality and everything else like that. You don't have to go extravagant and go, oh yeah, $2,000 on this, $2,000 on that. It's like start out small and then go from there, but just don't get like the bottom of the line. Get like midline gear so you can basically have the software to produce, and like your computer is number one. If your computer can't run the software or run your interface, then you have to get a better computer. Because if a computer fails, you're not going to be able to produce music. That's just end of the day on that one. So definitely your gear is like pretty number one, and then always like listen to your peers and listen to anybody that has like mix information for you. Like always listen to them, because somebody's going to hear it in a different way than what you're going to hear it, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, this sounds great, but then the person's going to be like, oh well, this doesn't sound great. So get multiple opinions, and once you get multiple opinions, then you go from there and kind of mix it to those criteria. But also don't mix it for them, but mix it for yourself as well. That's the number one, is always mix it for yourself, unless you're working for somebody, but always mix it for yourself and be like, oh yeah, I'm happy with this. And then like if your peers like it, if they don't like it, then you go from there. But if they have some critiques, then you just listen to it and see what you can do to fix it. And if they don't like it still, then that's their fault, and you keep doing you, basically.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming on Project Freelance and sharing your insight with everybody here. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. And if people want to follow your journey, or if they want to potentially hire you to produce something or even play guitar for them, where can they find you?
My Instagram is Charlie Thompson Music, which I don't know if you can link that in the description, but usually I'm active on my Instagram, and then my email's on there, all that kind of stuff is on there. And then sometimes on Facebook, which is just my name, Charlie N. Thompson. And then most of the time you'll see me because I pop up with some guitars. So yeah, that's that. And then we have a website too. My band does, Our Last Trial, which if you can link in that in the description as well, because it's a little longer. It's our merch site, but all of my contact information's on there as well, because I run all the Our Last Trial software and basically social media. So that's all me. So if anybody wants to hit me up, I'm on there and through my website and all kinds of other things.
All right, guys, that was my podcast with Charlie Thompson. Charlie, thank you for coming on the podcast. If you guys liked this episode and you want to hear more of his stuff, please go check out his socials down in the description below. Check out his band. And if you haven't listened to our covers of Demolisher by Slaughter to Prevail or our cover of Psychosocial by Slipknot, please go check those out. They were absolutely a blast to work on, and I hope you guys enjoy them. They're available on YouTube at K the Screamer Official, or on Spotify under K in Agonio. And like I said, I'll link all of them down below in the description for you guys. If you like this episode, please leave a rating and feedback. It helps the podcast grow. And I'll talk to you guys next week for another episode of Project Freelance. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out, and go create something.